Hey everyone, let's talk about A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Eimear McBride. But before we can talk about the book itself, we need to talk about why I got it and how I went into the book, because that has an effect on how I read it. Basically, I saw Matthew recommending the book, and something he said about the book got me interested. So I checked if I can get it on Audible, because I thought I wanted to read the next book by the author anyway. It wasn't until I started listening to the book that I noticed that I confused Eimear McBride with Emer O'Toole, and I was thinking of a new non-fiction feminist book I was going to read. If you do know what A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing is, you know it's not a non-fiction feminist read. Luckily, I like strange books, and I never mind going into books going blind. So talking about the book, let's separate it in writing and content story. The story is basically of a young girl growing up with a single mom and a brother who has had a brain tumor or brain surgery as a child, and it has some defects, let's call it that, afterwards. So he's not the brightest child. And we learn about her growing up with those two and how life with their mother was, who is a little bit of a religious fanatic and not always nice. Yeah, let's leave it at that for now. The writing, I listened to the book on audio. So going in blind as I did, the start, I thought this is written in verse because it sounded like that. It wasn't beautiful verse, it wasn't long sentence verse, it was something weird. So I basically went to Twitter and said like, what the hell is that? So Matthew recommended looking at the text, which I did. And it started to make a little bit more sense. The text isn't actually written in verse. I only looked at the first few pages, but it's chopped up sentences. So reading this on paper, I think it can be very confusing to understand how to read it. I had the advantage of listening to the audio, so I knew how the author wanted it to sound, which was really helpful. And she did a good job. I can only recommend that. But also, reading the first few pages really helped me understand what was going on a little bit better. So the narration is from the girl's point of view, and it starts before she's born, and she always addresses a you, which means her brother. She's basically talking to her brother throughout the whole time, telling him, partly us as well, but mostly him, the story of her life and her experiences. In the beginning, the text feels very much like a jumbled up stream of consciousness from a very confused child, which makes it hard to understand, of course. It gets better as she grows older, which is a common thing for stream of consciousness. But also, this is how she narrates. She narrates things talking about you. She expresses some conversations that she remembers. It's sometimes hard to follow who's talking now, who is the you she's referring to. I don't remember if she used any names. She uses a lot of you, mommy and uncle and aunt and friend, but I don't think there's any names in there. Correct me if I'm wrong. So this is how it's written. And now let's talk about the effect of it together. The story of the girl growing up is not in a happy household. The mother, like I said before, is turning more and more religious and fanatic. It's partly, I think, because of the disease of her son, and also partly because the father left and everything around, and also the mother's father is very religious. So that boils down to her being very abusive towards her children. When they were smaller, physically abusive, but also to the girl very verbally throughout her whole life. So it is very difficult to grow up in this household. Now, I'm going to talk more about what happens later. It's not, I don't know if it's a spoiler, but if you don't want to hear it, you should leave. But the girl with 13 is being sexually abused by her uncle, but we see it from her point of view and she thinks she wants it. But it's also painful, and the behavior of the uncle, we only see it through her eyes, so we don't really know what really happened. And that is a little bit freaky, and that is also stronger and harder to read or listen to because of the writing. I felt the writing with her chopped up narration and her stream of consciousness while things are happening, it's always in the now, is very raw and near and close to the content, to the action. And this is going on after the sexual abuse, which she doesn't really view as sexual abuse. She gets very promiscuous and is looking for, I think, sex as self-harm. That's what it felt like to me, but it may be just her narration and she didn't view it like that, but that's how it felt for me, that she was trying to drown out feelings and pain and life with random sex. And she continuously does that until she moves out and has a friend who's also very promiscuous, and they go around, they call it hunting, and they look for guys to sleep with. And then she starts up a strange relationship with her uncle when she's older, and it turns all very abusive. This book is very abusive from the girl's point of view, who seeks out the abuse, which also is problematic in her point of view for her psyche. But for you as a reader, it means you are so close to the action, you can really feel it. And it can be hard to read and digest if you have experienced anything similar, or if you're very sensitive to these kind of things. So this is something I think that this book makes hard to read. You really have a hard time sympathizing or caring for the main character because she doesn't really feel likable, but you're still in her brain when she does these things to herself. So you're very connected and feeling it very raw. At least that was my experience. So I hesitate to say this is a good book. I think it's interesting in the way it works with the writing and the story and how it affects how you experience the book. I don't know if I like the chopped up writing per se as an experiment. I don't know, it works well for the text and for achieving something with this book. But other than that, I don't know. I honestly can't say if I would have enjoyed reading it. I liked listening to it because you couldn't stop. You were really sucked and drawn into the mind of this girl, which is an amazing thing to do. So as you can see, I'm a little bit drawn. I kind of liked it. I didn't care that much for the story because you can't care for a story like that. It's very gruesome. And I felt so disconnected from the likable girl that I was like, ah, gosh, this is painful and I don't like you. Why are you doing this? So I don't know. It's not a bad book, but it's not an enjoyable read either. Let me know in comments if you have read the book, if you're interested in it, or if you have been wary about it, heard things about it, looked at it, put it aside, started it, anything. Let me know in comments and let's talk about strange books. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.